Hey mate, 40 here. I'm just feeling really vulnerable right now. It's wonderful that this is a safe space in which I can be vulnerable. I just want you to hold me right now. So 40, why are you feeling so vulnerable? It's the abundance of love that I have in my life. So why am I feeling all a quiver and nervous inside about the amount of love that I have in my life? If I was a normal, mature person, all right, it would be just like another Sunday morning. I think that, the majority of the population could handle the amount of love that I have in my life and not be all a quiver or nervous about it. But for me, it's a little daunting, a little scary. I feel like I have an intimation of what it's like to be a father for the first time, and like holding your baby in your hands for the first time, the newborn in your hands, and just feeling how vulnerable you are, how vulnerable the newborn is, how your life will forever change, and then all the responsibilities and complications that come with being a father. And that's what it's like when you often start new relationships that become absolutely intoxicating to you, or you renew old relationships and they just fill you up inside, and you feel, I don't know, you feel amazing, you feel excited, you feel anxious, you feel a quiver. It's a little bit like being in love, but it could be with, blokes or business relationships, or, being part of a religious community, or being a devoted follower of a particularly charismatic and brilliant rabbi. All these things can just, depending on your level of maturity. So it's really hard to grow up, right? It's really hard to raise your level of differentiation. And to whatever extent I've had, some success in my life over the last few years, I think a lot of it's simply not so much, the internal work I'm doing. It's not necessarily, all the prayer and meditation and the work that I'm doing. I think that's some of it, but a lot of it is I'm just putting myself in better situations. All right. When I put myself in a situation that's conducive to my thriving, guess what? I'm much more likely to thrive than when I put myself in a situation that's conducive to me being a jerk, me being cynical, me being selfish, me being histrionic, hyperbolic, attention seeking. Right. So if you're in a dull environment, if you're in an environment that's not bringing out the best in you, then it seems to me you have to change that environment somehow. See if you can find more fulfilling, stimulating environments, because I don't know about you, but I become pretty much like the people I hang out with, right? The people that I love have such a profound effect on me. But then there's always a complication with that. So I have a lot of friends who love Tony Robbins. I had one friend who was, fairly close to Tony Robbins. So if I'm going to maintain those friendships in good working order, I can't come out with the cynical, biting, cutting, demeaning, ridiculing remarks about Tony Robbins that are just right there at the tip of my tongue. That I'm just, very tempted to come out with, some, Tony Robbins put down. But if I'm at a Shabbat dinner with, Tony Robbins devotees, that's really not in my best interest. And yet I've done it, hundreds of times in my life. Or I fell in love with Kundalini Yoga in 2009. I spent $1,000 for a year-long membership to a Kundalini Yoga studio. Unlimited yoga for a year, bro. It was a great deal. And I went something like 212 times that first year. But what I do whenever I get really enthusiastic about something, I then try to read what the biggest critics of what I'm enthusiastic have to say. And so I read some critiques of 3HO, Happy, Healthy, Holy, Kundalini Yoga, and apparently hundreds of people had a really bad experience with this type of yoga. And I did have some setbacks. I suffered some irreparable injuries as I tried to keep up with the ridiculous poses that the rest of the class was doing. So for Westerners who don't grow up with yoga, aren't particularly flexible, like taking up yoga in middle age can be quite dangerous, right? A lot of people get substantially injured by doing yoga. There was a great New York Times Magazine article on the vast numbers of yoga-induced injuries, and so much so that various devotees of yoga say, unless you grow up with this, I don't recommend you take a yoga class. Some people can do it, but I would try to keep up with the class, and I would just stretch tendons that apparently couldn't be repaired. I mean, those tendons are going to be loose for life. All right, I spent thousands of dollars, all right, on physical therapy trying to undo the damage that I did to myself through my $1,000 unlimited yoga. And I did it all in the first few weeks before I kind of realized what was happening and then started opting out. Also, another thing that happened was that many of the procedures in this yoga, such as dog's breath, right, you can't do that without tightening and restricting your neck, which was going against my Alexander Technique training, my Alexander Technique teacher training. They noticed when I do various of these breath manipulation exercises, which are at the very core of Kundalini yoga, that I would tighten and restrict my neck, which would then send layers of tightness and restriction all through my body, because there are more joints in your neck than anywhere else in your body. So if your neck is tight, if your neck is restricted, if your head's tipping back onto your neck, you're sending those layers of tightness and restriction throughout your body. So your back's going to be tight. You even may feel excess tightness and restriction in your ankles, in your voice, in your thinking, in your emotions, in your shoulders, right? All sorts of things are going to be negatively affected. And I couldn't do a lot of these Kundalini voice exercises without tightening and restricting my neck. So I learned to give them up. But that's what happens when you love, bro. That's what happens when you fall in love, right? You start being put on a crucible where you have to choose between competing allegiances. And so I read all these devastating critiques of Kundalini yoga, and I thought, should I write about these? I don't want to damage my relationship with this Kundalini yoga studio. I really love it there, right? I have a happy, healthy, holy community there, Kundalini, and I loved it so much that I even got up at 2 a.m. to go to the studio on Yogi Bhajan's birthday. Hey, it was Yogi Bhajan's birthday. Now, I never did go to the teacher training, which cost thousands of dollars, but I was kind of impaled on the horns of dilemma. Now, I want to write about the people who've had negative experiences with Kundalini yoga. At the same time, say that I've had a wonderful experience, but all sorts of things can be wonderful for you and terrible for somebody else. And I didn't want to put my relationships at the yoga studio, with the 3HO community, with the Kundalini yoga community. I didn't want to put them at risk, but I opted to publish some blog posts about the downsides of Kundalini yoga, and I'm not sure how much significantly it damaged my relationships within the Kundalini yoga community, but it's like that with Orthodox Judaism too. You convert to Orthodox Judaism, you want to be very careful about writing anything critical of Orthodox Jews. Oh, man, because whatever you say publicly, whether it's on a live stream or on a blog post, it always gets back to people that you're talking about, and there are frequently repercussions. And that's, that. Relationships, I build these communities, and then there are always restrictions that come with falling in love. It's so intoxicating having a community, having a teacher, having your own Rabbi. All right, it's a wonderful thing. It fills you up inside. But with community, relationship, love, Rabbi, right, there are always then restrictions on you. So how I've learned to navigate that is that I'm willing to give up some love, some relationships, some community, some attachments for more freedom. And I'm willing to give up some freedom in exchange for some love, relationships, community, and freedom. So I'm not speaking to you right now from a completely disconnected place. Like I feel like with many live streamers, they don't really have many, real life friends, real life relationships, real life communities that they could put in danger by what they're doing online. They're just willing to burn up everything in their real life to to build a virtual world for themselves online. And what kind of damaged person is willing to blow up everything that they've got going on in their real life, all right, just to become a prince online, at least in their own imagination. I recently reconnected with a friend of mine, and we hadn't spoken for about 14 years, and this was his decision. And it came out of an intense situation where I played a really big role. So once I did a fourth step on it and saw the big role that I'd played in the dissolution of this friendship, I was able to drop any resentment I had there. But when we fell out, my friend said to me, "Here's the feeling in this house. I don't trust you. My kids fear you. My wife hates you." Wow. But that was the situation that I had placed us in, and it wasn't so much that I was wasn't a mensch, like I wasn't truly righteous, but I wasn't heinous either. I was just me. I was just a flawed human being. But then, I have the chance to repair and reconnect with that very good friend, and it just reconnected, and it feels so good. Reconnected and you're understood. Is there anything more intoxicating? So, as part of my conversion to Orthodox Judaism, I've gotten to meet and to know so many fantastic rabbis. And one of the rabbis that I've met is just brilliant, charismatic guy named Rabbi Shlomo Einhorn, and here he is.
Okay, let's begin. So, what is this Shifas thing? And this is you guys are like a test lab over here in the Shir, as we're going to do our first run, and we're not stuck into this to oblivion. We're going till Rosh Hashanah, see if we can get. The goal ultimately is real mastery over that which you learn. That you should be able to be sitting in online at Mensch, and while you're there, you can review the entire Gemara in your head back and forth, Shaklavataria. Someone brings up a comment in a shir that you're at, you're sitting there. You could say to yourself, wait a second, Chagiga Daf Zayin on the bottom, 3 lines in the bottom, actually says a little bit differently than what this person is saying up there. And so why this robust goal to have a Masechta at your fingertips, to have true mastery over Masechta. So the idea behind Shifas is ultimately to say to yourselves, it's 2022. We know so much about how the brain works nowadays. We really, Baruch Hashem, we're in a generation where we really understand the ins and outs of current brain research. There's so many great learning methods, and each of them seem to miss a little something, meaning Daf Yomi was never intended for mastery. It was never intended for mastery. It was intended for people to take a journey, a consistent journey through Shas together. So the Maila of Daf Yomi is that it's consistent, it's every day. The deficiency of Daf Yomi is that you really don't have true mastery on any section of Shas because of it. And at times it could leave you a little frustrating because you learned something 10 days ago and someone talks to you about it, as though you never heard it before. And unless you're doing a triple Daf Yomi, it's not really going to stay in your head. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to mitigate sort of the handicaps of each one of the learning systems and take the best of each, and to put something together that could perhaps give us an extra advantage in terms of mastery over any content. So I'd like to introduce you to and walk you through a few of the various learning systems that we're going to be using to help us enhance our learning.
I spent over 5 years of my life in Daf Yomi, and then finish off the rest of Shas, meaning the Talmud, on my own, but it was obviously very superficial learning that I did, right? I don't have deep learning in Talmud.
Learning, okay? So number one is the Daf Yomi. What I mean by the Daf Yomi is we're going to take the element of consistency from the Daf Yomi itself. That's number one. Consistency is key. The way it's going to work, the She'ifas Shir, is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Shabbos morning and Sunday is going to be used for your review. Okay, we'll get into how it works, but that's for your chazara to be able to really review everything. Number two, there's a system called Kerem Yoshua. That's the second system I want to deal with. Kerem Yoshua is someone by the name of Shas Cohen. Shas Cohen, I'll call him from time to time. For example, if I needed to discuss every Gemara that has a commentary or something to say about foods they used to eat, every call him Shas Cohen, and I'll quickly rattle off for you 16 different dapim. or pages of where they discuss food, every detail. Shas Cohen is really a brilliant individual. You could buy his sefer. It's called Kerem Yoshua. So what's his methodology? I spoke to him a lot about his system and his method. His method is, if you truly seek to understand the machlokes, it stays in your mind. If you analyze the machlokes, you have a better shot of retaining the Gemara. So, for example, if you have a machlokes, Abaye and Rava, on this or that, you ask yourself, why would Abaye say what he says? Why would Rava say what he says? Now, sometimes the Gemara will clarify their reasons. Sometimes the Rishonim. For Shas Cohen, it's less about being 100% accurate in you knowing why they said what they said, but rather it's the exercise of trying to think, what would the other opinion say back to that? That very exercise promotes a greater knowledge of the Gemara.
So I love Rabbi Einhorn. There are many rabbis that I love, but let's just talk about sociological reality. If I went to his class every day, all right, that would bring with it, all sorts of restrictions upon me or if I frequently played, all right, every day I could play some, brilliant excerpt from a Rabbi Shlomo Einhorn presentation. But then what would inevitably happen is if I did anything wrong or edgy, people would go to Rabbi Einhorn and say, hey, this guy who admires you so much, did you know that he said this or that he did that? When I was a big Talmud, a follower of Dennis Prager, whenever I do anything edgy or wrong, just plain out ugly and disgusting, people would run to Dennis Prager. Or when I started writing, God forbid, on the pornography industry, I just get bombarded with questions like, what does Dennis Prager think about what you're doing? And so if I was playing, Shlomo Einhorn, every day, then I'd have to confront every day people, oh, well, what does Rabbi Einhorn think about what you just said? And it's a pain. And as soon as I started blogging sometimes critically about Dennis Prager, and we, ceased being acquaintances, Los Angeles friends, then nobody ever bothered me about that again. So you form a connection, you form a bond, right? You form a relationship that's important to you. And then people always go for your vulnerabilities. They know how to work you. So I have the pleasure of knowing, many brilliant Orthodox rabbis, and it's wonderful. It's intoxicating. It fills me up inside. It always comes with a price, right? They, in turn, have favors to ask. Levi, do you mind taking down this blog post? Or you just can't say, these sorts of things that you're saying on your blog or on your live stream anymore. And so I sometimes have to choose between my relationship with the rabbi and saying what I believe to be true. Now, sometimes the rabbi's helping me out. Sometimes it's good and right and proper, and it's in my own best interests, and it's in the community's best interests, and it's in the world's best interests if I take down or modify a certain blog post. But other times I have chosen to let the relationship wither on the vine because I want to say what I believe to be true. I mean, I've had, attractive women who essentially said to me, I want to be your girlfriend, but you can't talk about human biodiversity on your show. And I chose HBD rather than them. And I have wonderful women in my life who are feminists. All right. And so obviously I can't talk to them the way that, I talk to you on the show. I'm going to offend them. And if they happen to tune into my show, they are going to be offended. And they may very well give me, an ultimatum. All right. It's like, look, I can't see you anymore, or I can't be friends with you anymore if you stick to these outdated notions that, there are fundamental differences between men and women. So if I started saying on the show, women shouldn't have the right to vote, and I mean, I would understand a whole bunch of women in my life would say, I just can't be friends with you anymore. And so doing a show or just doing live, all right, you're constantly facing incentives to sell yourself out, to compromise on what you believe to be true, to shut up at times when you want to speak up, to preserve relationships that are most important to you. And I don't side with either extreme. I don't side with always selling out to preserve your relationships. I don't side with always speaking your truth at the cost of the most important relationships in your life. But it's just a little bit more from Rabbi Einhorn, and you can find a lot of his Torah on yutorah.org.
And another element of Shas Cohen is that he's very into you reviewing the give and take. It's not about word for word. None of these systems, by the way, are really going to emphasize word-for-word memory. I don't believe for a minute that when the Amoraim or the Tanaim were sitting together in the Beis Medrash, they made sure that people memorized the exact language of the way that they argued. The Mishnah, you could say, was meant to be remembered for its syntax, but even the Mishnah, it seems, was meant to be remembered for its context and ideas. So Kerem Yeshua analyzes a machlokas, and then you review the back and forth. So we have consistency, analysis of machlokas. Then you have zichru. Zichru's become very popular lately. It's a lot of fun. If you look on page 3 of your Shifas packet, is a image from Zichru Chagiga Daf Beis. What Zichru does is he uses also modern memory techniques, which we're going to get into. I've been studying memory techniques since I was 10 years old.
So we're talking with Rabbi Einhorn. Someone's got an IQ in the 150s. All right. When I was speaking to him, I'm talking to someone with 2 standard deviations of IQ above me, and think about how hard it is. Like it verges on the impossible to effectively communicate with people who are either 2 standard deviations of IQ above you or below you. So just imagine for him, like he must feel like his brain slowing down when he talks to me. But this is one of the great things about modern Orthodox Judaism, is that there is sometimes a genuine attempt to seek out the best of modern secular learning and often apply it or combine it with traditional Torah learning.
But Zichru uses a lot of them. It incorporates it. So, for example, Daf Beis, the letter Beis, is a bayit. It's a house. So he always has a picture of a house. And then he keeps 3 main ideas from Daf Beis in the image. It's already there, embedded in the image. So you now have a visual. So worst case scenario, if somebody says to you, Chagiga Daf Zayin, you have the image for Zion. Zion's always his gun. You have an image of a gun, and then 3 pictures that are associated with it. So you have 3 topics from Chagiga Daf Zayin right away. At least that. You may not have. Now, the deficiency of Zichru is you don't need to know much more than that. You could just rattle off 3 things from every single daf and shas and sound like you know everything, but you can't go into any of the back and forth whatsoever, and you can't really explain what you mean. But you have a picture of, for example, you have on Ksuvas daf vav, you have a pirza dechuka, person going through a narrow entryway. So you have a picture of a rabbi entering into a pirza dechuka. What do you do with that sugya? So unless you learned it, you don't know what to do with it, but you've memorized something. So that's another component, having a visual aid, because the words, every Gemara looks very similar to us and begins to get monotonous after a while. But if you have a visual, it's very powerful. Master Torah, which I think actually ironically came down this week, Master Torah's unique contribution to the learning world was the creator of it actually created a review system that makes sense based on modern brain research. How frequent, when, and at what intervals should you be reviewing something to maximize your retention of the information?
Okay, so some more content like this from Rabbi Shlomo Einhorn on YU Torah, or elsewhere on the web. So think about how hard it's been for people to be friends with a personality like Richard Spencer, who's been all over the place ideologically and controversial, and obviously said and done a lot of really stupid and destructive things. But he also, in all his nonsense, says some thoughtful, interesting things. So here he's talking about a Russian operative who is working in the United States, earning approximately $600,000 to $1,300,000 from her social media activities over the past 2 years. Right? She continues her channels as though nothing has happened. Her supporters engaged in the same way. Last 5 winners of the Iowa GOP caucus were Ted Cruz, Rick Santorum, and George W. Bush. So Richard says, this leads me to make the prediction that Mike Pence will win the 2024 Iowa caucus. A bold pick. Spencer has been platformed, and not just platformed Richard Spencer, also Nick Spencer. One former co-host says morale at the No Jumper podcast plummeted. especially among Black and Jewish employees, when Adam 22 began platforming hate figures. All right, there are just so many ways to diminish and dismiss people, and one of the easiest is just to call someone a hate figure rather than engaging and debunking and what someone has to say and pointing out where it's dangerous. So let's have a look at this thread. Adam denies the allegations. The idea that I repeatedly asked her to do porn made her feel uncomfortable is false. Never put any pressure on her to shoot with us any time. No Jumper podcast. Adam 22 is being accused of pressuring women to have sex with him. Nick Spencer. And also platformed Destiny. Popular podcast host has platformed hate figures, guys, allegedly pressured women to have sex with him. Former staff and guests allege a culture of exploitation and coercion. So what kind of man pressures a woman to have sex with him? Right? Kind of man who's around women who allow themselves to be pressured to have sex, right? Do you think if he'd try to pressure your normal traditional Mormon or Christian or Orthodox Jewish woman that these women would have felt constrained? So I'm thinking about this one creepy guy who's always creeping on women, but he never does it with traditional women, right? He never does it with Orthodox Jews. People choose their prey, right? Predators choose their prey. I mean, even hyenas, right? Or predators in nature, they go for the easiest prey, generally speaking. So someone who wants to go shoot up a synagogue, the two examples that we have from a few years ago, they chose synagogues without any security guard outside. So the more formidable your security arrangement and the more formidable the vibe that you give out, right, the less likely you are to, be the prey for some predator. All right, Instagram influencer Lisa Jane appeared on No Jumper, the massively popular podcast whose content bounces from hip-hop to current events to odd appearances by alt-right polemicists. She discussed her alleged sexual encounters with multiple members of the Phoenix Suns basketball team, and a particular R&B singer held her in a hotel apparently against her will and engaged in water sports. And so comments went viral, causing Jane, she says, to lose her job and to get kicked out of her parents' home. So yeah, you start something up with other people, all right? You damage other people, they will find ways of hurting you. So this led to her No Jumpers appearance. She got her own show, but the joy of a new gig quickly turned to disgust as Adam sought her out to film a sex scene with his then fiancée, Lena. He noticed that when she refused, he began to mistreat her. I noticed the second I didn't want to do a scene with him, he started trying to make me look horrible on his platform, so I started going on after that. So he didn't just choose her out of the blue, right? He felt like he could pressure her into doing things, right? She gave off a vibe. So when I would go to a party, I would inevitably find the women whose fathers were sex addicts. And there was something about my damage and their damage that just made us incredibly attracted to each other. So morale among this guy's Black and Jewish employees cratered when he began platforming hate figures like Richard Spencer and Nick Fuentes. The Destiny and Richard Spencer debate race, religion, Andrew Tate, Joe Biden on the No Jumper podcast. All right, what else here is on Richard's feed? Trump is at his best when he's at war with conservatives. He's at his worst when the two are at peace.
It's gone sick. And I don't like the term woke because I hear woke. It's like just a term that half the people can't even define it. They don't know what it is. It's gone sick. And I don't like the term woke because I hear woke. It's like just a term that
Decades ago, some might defect to the USSR because they discovered Marxism. Now they just defect to Russia on the basis of current Republican talking points. So Tara Reid, the woman who accused Joe Biden of rape,
in a very long time,
she's moved to Russia.
Safe, and I felt heard, and I felt respected. And that has not happened in my own country. I did talk to U.S. Congressman Matt Gaetz. I have not concealed anything. I told him I was in Moscow, Russia, and
So Matt Gaetz is friends with Chuck Johnson, the VC capitalist and entrepreneur and prolific tweeter, Substack writer, hosts many Twitter spaces. And Chuck Johnson introduced Matt Gaetz to his wife.
I told him why, and he said something very stunning. I am considered a whistleblower, as you know. in the United States. One of the cases I will be testifying is about how the DOJ and the FBI has weaponized by the Biden administration against its own citizens. So he said, Tara, you know, I'm worried about your physical safety in the United States. As a U.S. citizen, to hear a U.S. congressman basically say they couldn't protect me in a whistleblower case is stunning. And it makes me angry. And I want to say to my fellow American citizens that as these cases...
Why would you think a U.S. congressman would have the power to protect you? Right? There's only so much protection that anyone can extend. We live in a flawed and frequently dangerous world.
Against all of us are coming forward that speak out. I want you to remember the U.S. Congress works for the U.S.
Okay, get back here. Jason Hinkle, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the CIA protected Bandera, hid him, encouraged his violent clashes with Soviet officials. The USSR fell in 1991. Bandera died in 1959.
After the fall of the Soviet Union, directly after, CIA protected Bandera, hid him, and encouraged him to pursue his bloody, violent clashes against Soviet officials.
Yeah, the guy died in 1959. Elon Musk had a dream. One day, homosexuals too could perish in a fiery technological death cage after opting in to self-driving AI and ironically willing their own demise. Geopolitical triangle was coming into view. Trump had top secret information about a war against Israel's enemy Iran, which he might have shared with Israel's crypto ally Saudi Arabia, which was funding Trump's golf course and son-in-law's hedge fund. So federal prosecutors have Donald Trump on tape in 2021 acknowledging he kept a classified Pentagon document about a potential attack on Iran. Populist pundit says Trump betrayed the multi-racial working class base by failing to enact tough immigration policies. So this is Ron DeSantis' spokeswoman saying that immigration has been a positive thing for America because illegal aliens work hard and pay taxes. She defends Dreamers, claims that if illegal aliens have kids here, then the kids are Americanized.
On balance, immigration has been a net positive thing for our country. I think it needs to be better, not better enforced or regulated. Just the law needs to be better.
Who is Tara Reid? She's the woman who accused Joe Biden of raping her.
Because right now, it's extremely difficult to immigrate legally, even for qualified people, even for people who are working hard, which many undocumented immigrants do, by the way. They work and they pay taxes, even if they're not legal in the country. I think, though, we need to streamline the system so that it's...
Yeah, what about the American citizens? What about the repercussions of allowing people who came here illegally to then profit from their illegal action? Right? What about the effects that this has on other people? Base populism is stacking up wins around the world. They'll come after those fake dinosaurs next. So India cuts periodic tables and evolution from school textbooks. So Israel now has a majority Hindu nationalist government. And there's Tara Reid. Wow, who's your Vladdy? And let's have a look at this Richard Spencer thread from late May. So it began with a thread by Nathan Kofnes. So he says, in 2017, Steven Pinker could refer with a straight face to the often highly literate, semi-intelligent people who gravitate to the alt-right. How did it go from a semi-genuine intellectual movement to groyperism in just under 3 years? Good question. So Kofner says, instead of creating institutions to elevate smart and effective people, the alt-right developed a culture of appealing to the lowest common denominator centered around memes and trolling with no mechanism to expel the psychologically disturbed. 2018, I would have said the worst reasoners are vegans, with wokesters and alt-righters tied for second place. Now I'd say that dissident rightists are even worse than vegans. Their arguments consist entirely of ad hominem attacks to refute stuff they couldn't read or understand. Kofner says, I'm not mourning the demise of the alt-right, which was never my thing, but it's interesting that similar trajectories are followed in most conservative movements. And let's have a look at this Richard Spencer tweet in reply. Yes, the institutions in the alt-right are focused on the Southern strategy of race baiting. The youth desperately want to red pill the normies, which means they are hostile to intellectual activity, probably not capable of it. The boomers and the gropers deserve one. My sense of the alt-right or the distant right is that they flip back and forth between advocating for voting Republican and engaging in spree shootings. Okay, that's dramatic overstatement. All right, just like with Muslim terrorists, they've never been more than 0.00001% of Muslims. So too, alt-right or terrorists have never been more than 0.00001% of the alt-right. But still, they do. Both groups have people doing enough horrible terroristic things that they have substantially damaged the overall reputation of their group. And Kofner is remarking on something that Colin Liddell explained in greater depth. When the alt-right was primarily a medium of the written word, right, it was a much higher IQ movement. But then when it became primarily about live streaming and podcasts, then it became a much lower IQ movement. So what people devote themselves to extreme politics? What type of people devote themselves to extreme religion? What type of people devote themselves to a pundit or a guru? Like, what accounts for followers, right? Some people can listen to Dennis Prager or, you know, some other guru and pundit and not devote their life to him like I did, right? When I was basically bedridden, right? I was, it's so embarrassing. My God. Let's turn it over to Stephen J. James.
Watching much of Luke Ford lately?
I haven't watched any of it.
Have you not?
I feel so disconnected. I mean, I know I have a mobile, but I don't really check it. So I haven't been watching anybody. So let's see this thing. Assessing Dennis Prager, the guru. What's that about?
So what I'm going to say is the other day, essentially, I think he did what was like, this might be overstating it, but like his solo magnum opus. Okay, I might be overstating it, but this is essentially what I would put as a candidate for that. Okay, he's assessing Dennis Prager, the guru. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, Luke Ford is a convert to Judaism. He's, as Mike Enoch called it, he's a guy who consumed so much pornography he became Jewish. But the real backstory is that Luke Ford had a very strict upbringing as a Seventh-day Adventist in a Christian religious fundamentalist sect, effectively, and rebelled from that, as is often the case, like you get with people who are born Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or Seventh-day Adventists and that. And you either go fully deep into the cult and further it, or you rebel against it, really. And like Luke did that and went searching for his own path, and he was broken character in many ways, daddy issues and things like that, and he looking for something else, and he ended up in Los Angeles in his youth, in this state, and he latched on to Dennis Prager. Who is this Jewish talking head, isn't he, Claire? How would you describe Dennis Prager?
Well, he's reform. And yes, yesterday I saw a clip of him, and he mispronounced Chabad. He said Shabbat. Yeah, I mean, I just
wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, Prager, Dennis Prager of, you might have heard of his whatever it is, news organization, or however they pitch
Prager
themselves.
University.
PragerU, yes. They're an American setup to like put out content, entertainment and shows and things, mainly to an American Christian audience, but under the guise, I think, of not talking like overtly Jewish, but certainly Dennis Prager is Jewish, and so its founding is Jewish and everything. And anyway, it's not like Dennis Prager hides being a Jew. That's not what I'm on about. But they pitch it to a wider audience, don't they? Like there's some kind of Judeo-Christian value system and things like that, and let's all get together and keep the Jews at the top, basically. But anyway, Dennis Prager was Luke's guru, effectively. And this has kind of been a long time coming in him really like pulling the rug from under that and kind of doing like a critical expose of Dennis Prager. but not in a. It's not done in a nasty way. It's really the only person who could ever really do this is Luke. Luke is like the perfect character to do this because he was like a devotee of Dennis Prager for years, and then he became obsessed with him. And then I think he had like falling out with him, probably when he probably like started to stalk him or something, and then there was a blow up between them or whatever. But it's taken many, many years for Luke to really address the topic, I think, and I think he did it in a great way. So just while I run and get a drink, let's just listen to a couple of minutes of this and then see if you've got any thoughts on it. I just thought you'd be interested in it. I guess Jen probably watched it. Hopefully we can hear it.
So what type of person falls hard for a guru? And God forbid there may be someone out there who might play a guru role. So what type of people are looking for gurus? So let me tell you about my situation when I first heard Dennis Prager. It was August of 1988. I was 21, and I was at UCLA a month before the dormitories opened up because I'd been hobbled by chronic fatigue syndrome for the previous 7 months, and my family had suggested doctors that I could see in Southern California, and I didn't want to pay for a hotel, so I was just living out of my car, sleeping in the bushes outside a girls' softball field. And so I was feeling pretty desperate, pretty lonely. I was pretty much on my own for a month before school started. And so my primary companion was my radio. And so I listened to a lot of talk radio. And then on Saturday and Sunday nights on KBC radio, I started listening to Dennis Prager. And this voice, this commanding manner, this charisma, this confidence that spoke to me, it sounded like this was God speaking at Mount Sinai. And so I was in desperate need for a virtual friend. And I was in desperate need for a virtual father figure because I didn't have much of a relationship with my own father. So I needed comfort, security. I needed something, all right? And so I was in a state of pretty high anxiety. I was in a state of depression. My life had just fallen apart due to my ill health. All my plans had amounted to nothing. I was looking for a way to try to make sense out of life. Then Dennis Prager came along, and I embraced his approach. It's like, oh, yeah, God, Judaism, ethical monotheism, right? I want to enroll in the fight for good values, right? And so it was absolutely intoxicating for me. And it gave me meaning and purpose and transcendence. I had something to live for, and I felt like I had someone, Dennis Prager, understood me and who was a good role model. And I preferred my virtual father to my real father. And I preferred my virtual friend, Dennis Prager, to many of the people that I was interacting with in real life, particularly when I went home to Northern California. I was living in an isolated part of Northern California, and how desperately I tuned my radio to KABC once the sun went down.
Let me just address a controversial statement in the chat that Damien thinks that Luke's gay. One thing Luke is not is gay. We know. Let's just get this out of the way. He's not a gay man. He's very the opposite, actually. He's
I can confirm that.
A womanizer, basically.
Yes, and he talks about it all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Luke's history is a difficult one with women, basically. So you don't have to worry about that. It's something that I in a odd way, respect him for.
So that I could try to pick up Dennis Prager's voice from Los Angeles all the way into Sacramento. It was like a lifeline for me. And so whatever the criticisms that I have of Dennis Prager today, I mean, I may very well not be here, right, without the kindness that he showed me, right, and without him enlisting me in the battle for good values and feeling like I was important, I had a role to play. I first met Dennis Prager in person on a Friday night, January 28th, 1994, in Tampa Bay, and then after he spoke Saturday morning, so that would have been January 29th, 1994. So I would have been, I think, 27 at this time. He kind of motioned me over. He was driving away in his car, and then he saw me and just like motioned me over. We got to talk privately for about 10 minutes, and he said, Luke, it gives me inner peace. It gives me a source of comfort that if something happens to me, that you'll be around to fight for good values. I mean, can you imagine what that meant to me? That I was a source of comfort and peace to Dennis Prager because I was around to fight for good values. Now, in retrospect, in 2023, I realized that Dennis Prager told this to dozens of people, probably hundreds of people. One of his favorite lines he says to his YouTube co-host Julie Hartman when she says, "Oh, your book changed my life," and Dennis says, "Well, if it changed your life, then it would have been worth it." And I'm sure he's used that very line to thousands of people. And for people who have high anxiety, like Julie and like me, right, those kind of lines are a lifeline. They're intoxicating. They are soothing and calming. This is a virtual friend. This is in Julie's case, it's a real life friend. But most people who listen to Dennis Prager, it's a parasocial relationship that provides a sense of meaning, purpose, transcendence, and comfort in life. And so when I was basically bedridden from 1989 to 1994, right, I was spending my money. Right, I spent almost all the money I had, right, not seeking cures to my chronic fatigue syndrome. I spent almost all the money I had sending Dennis Prager tapes out to my friends who frequently didn't listen to them, who laughed at them, who said that I must be mad. And I realized now, yeah, they were right. I was mad. I was getting much of my meaning and purpose in life from my imaginary or virtual friend, Dennis Prager. And because I became convinced that like Dennis Prager was such a great man, that simultaneously buoyed up my own sense of self because I had some, slim, slender connection to Dennis Prager. And so I was connected to the great man. So the greater Dennis Prager was, the more important Dennis Prager was, the more prescient Dennis Prager was, right, the greater I was because I recognized his greatness and that I had, a slender personal connection to Dennis Prager. I was connected to this source of greatness and life and love, and it was embarrassing. I look back and see, how eagerly I, jumped into the Dennis Prager cult. But I did it from a place like maybe you. Do you have above average levels of anxiety, above average levels of depression? Do you feel, disconnected from people in your life? Are you unsatisfied with your real world alternatives? Then you'll find a virtual guru, a parasocial relationship with a YouTube personality or a talk show host. It might fill you up. You might very well prefer it to flawed people that you know in real life, because when you're getting it from a YouTube host or a podcaster or a radio talk show host, right, you're getting a performance. So Dennis Prager always says, if you listen to me on the radio, that's who I am, that's me. But it's not. It's a performance. What I'm doing now is a performance, right? Just because you hear me on YouTube or on a podcast doesn't know you know me. You're just getting one, aspect of me. This is a performance. I have to use 5 to 10 times the amount of energy talking here to my cam, right? Speaking across. We're live on YouTube. We are going out live.
So, in spite of what Luke's saying right now, in many ways, in this episode, which I'm labeling his solo magnum opus, effectively, this stream, assessing Dennis Prager, the guru, he's very, very revealing about himself and open, and it's a great listen as well. And it's funny, and any thoughts, Claire, on that?
Well, I suppose I have heard the story quite a few times already. So, I mean, Luke is certainly prepared to share, embarrassing parts of his life with us.
Sure. What he does, he goes through it and he watches various clips, and I mean, it took a long time for him to put this thing together. And I can imagine that something like this, would it get back to Dennis Prager, and would he ever see it and feel? I know it's not the first time Luke's criticized Dennis, but it's often difficult to criticize somebody that you look up to or that you used to look up to.
Yeah, because you're kind of criticizing your own choice for having once admired them.
Yeah. And you're always worry about it, like, in many ways, I'm worried about it when I start criticizing Academic Agent, for instance. Things like that, and that kind of blew up in my face a bit, but let's just jump into a bit here.
Perceive them. So this idea that the criticism doesn't bother him at all. In fact, he wishes he had more of it, but good faith criticism, like intellectually honest criticism, that's what he longs for.
Tell me about them. It doesn't tell me about you if you disagree with me, but if you hate me, it doesn't tell me anything about me. It tells me everything about you.
Okay, so if you hate the pollution of the public discourse, you're going to hate Dennis Prager. It's not going to be the only emotion you have to him. You'll appreciate his humor. You'll appreciate his wisdom when he is wise. You'll appreciate the good things that he does. But you will hate him for polluting public discourse, for damaging lives, for encouraging all sorts of self-destructive, antisocial behavior. So it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you hate how Dennis Prager pollutes public discourse.
I know that I aim to do good and do good. There are very many people who have better marriages because of my male-female hour. There are many happier people because of my happiness book, happiness lectures, and happiness hour. There are many people who have reconciled with their parents because they heard me. Okay, how many leftists who hate my guts can say that? Zero. How many people are kinder because they were influenced by a leftist? Zero.
Not only.
Really? Most social workers are leftists. You don't think anyone has been improved from interacting with a social worker? Most psychologists, most therapists are leftists. I would expect many doctors are on the left. Most teachers are on the left. You don't think anyone has been improved, made kinder by having a kind teacher? I think absolute nonsense what he was just saying. So let's keep it classy here, guys. I mean, this is a show of radical love and inclusion, right? Just because somebody.
People. So, but you're thinking of just where politics had nothing to do with your crime while you're charged.
Yes. Who would you trust more to
Well,
rule
I
honorably? And it's the same thing with woke people. Would you rather have 12 non-woke people?
So, what do I need to do to get your mother on this show?
There's this point in it where Dennis Prager says. There's this point where Dennis Prager apparently says that he had this realization in his life that his entire moral system was identical to the Torah. And he had this realization, and he really it's bizarre when Luke points this out, and that's a good laugh.
Denying me, like
I can't find it.
The disciples of Jesus who denied him 3 times before the cock crew. Lapenia says, in Prager's defense, I had a friend put his knee on my neck. I was fine. I could breathe normally. I would do speeches for $1,000. Library at Alexandria, European colonialism, Russia.
Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. I can't find a bit. So I'll put the link in the chat if anybody wants to watch it.
Yes, I mean, he never appealed to me on, he never impressed me that much. And I know
who Prager. What you mean?
Yeah, him. You know, he just seems a bit brash and vulgar to me.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't he? But
it's like a creepy.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it would have been easy to be influenced by him, I guess, when he was just like a voice on the radio. But since the internet, you have to look at him, don't you? Which I suppose is bad.
Yeah.
But as a voice on the radio, as a good radio voice, I suppose, Dennis Prager.
Yes.
But there was, though, Luke did a follow-up video.
Video. Anything waiting.
Yeah, after doing that stream, Luke did this very short 1.5 minute follow-up video, which I'll share with you.
G'day, mate. 40 here, hanging out on Rodeo Drive, just doing a little shopping, and I just had a really exciting revelation. I just realized that my instincts are God's instincts. I am aligned with God, and it's like such a great feeling to be aligned with God. And that's why I'm right so often on my YouTube show, and that's why you should send me super chats and like and subscribe, because my instincts are just identical to the Torah's instincts, which are just identical to God's instincts, because God wrote the Torah. And whether I'm on Rodeo Drive or in Compton or on the Santa Monica Beach, it's just to me.
So he's mocking Dennis Prager, obviously. You get it, don't you?
Yes. To be absolutely aligned with God, just to be one with God, just to have the same instincts. And that accounts for my prescience, and that accounts for why you should listen to my Cassandra-like warnings. And that's why I'm able to be so profound. That's why I'm able to share with you so much truth. And that's why I am enrolling you in the battle for good values. And that's why we have to take back this country from the communist guys, from the satanic Democrat pedophiles, right? And what can I say? Just feeling aligned with the universe right now. Blessings.
Anyway. So. Alrighty. Claire.
Yeah, so just an amazing moment on the Dennis and Julie show a few months ago. This is Dennis.
How they've influenced me. I don't think I've ever said this publicly. That's one of the beauties of our podcast. It forces me to say things I don't normally say. At a certain point, I don't remember when, but it was early on, I said to myself, wow, your instincts are identical to the Torah's. And it blew my mind. My natural mode of thinking was the Torah's mode of thinking. And that's why I feel such a moral obligation to get it in print. Because if you take those 5 books seriously, you will think morally clearly. You will think clearly about everything.
And you'll be so much happier.
Yeah, well, you could testify.
Oh my God. I mean, society will run better. Your life will run better. Personally, you will feel enriched and fulfilled and happier.
So at a certain point in this show, in this series, not necessarily this episode, Dennis remarks to Julie, you're sleeping better now, right? Because, you've taken my advice. You've gone public, you've embraced a religious perspective, but religion really doesn't cure, generally speaking, underlying psychological issues like high anxiety and sleeplessness that Julie suffers from. So her sleeplessness returns, right? Her high anxiety returns. So as far as this is the answer to everything, I'm afraid that they're going to find out that that's not true. All right, that there are a couple of million Orthodox Jews in the world who take Torah seriously, and they suffer from high anxiety, right? They suffer with sleeplessness. They suffer from anger. They suffer from all the human foibles, right? If you meet an Orthodox Jew, you're not likely to meet someone who is more honest than a completely secular Jew or a secular Christian, right? You're not necessarily going to meet someone who's more, holy. You're not going to meet someone who's kinder or nicer. You're just going to meet someone who's got a very high in-group identity.
Thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's why I feel such a moral obligation to get it in print. Because if you take those 5 books seriously, you will think morally clearly. You will think clearly about everything.
And you'll be...
Yeah, guess what? If you take the 5 books of Torah seriously, it may very well have some clarifying effect, but you're not going to think clearly about everything. There's no one solution. There's no magic key to life, right? The Torah is not a magic key to life. Right? Orthodox Jews do not think clearly about everything. They struggle with unhappiness, alcoholism, porn addiction, dishonesty. All the normal human foibles are just as present among Orthodox Jews as among people who aren't Orthodox Jews. They may manifest themselves somewhat differently and in different degrees.
He's so much happier.
Yeah, well, you could testify.
Oh my God. I mean,
yes, that's the one thing we know about Orthodox Jews. They just vibrate happiness. I mean, what kind of world is this in? There are plenty of Orthodox Jews, such as Chabad Jews, who are happy, who do, most, Lubavitchers I've known, do seem to be pretty happy people. But overall, would anyone seriously argue that Orthodox Jews just seem happier than the average person? That's not what I've seen.
your society will run better. Your life will run better personally.
There are all sorts of problems that come with a devotion to Torah. All right. The most devoted to Torah segment of Israel do everything they can to live off public assistance, to not, hold down real jobs, and who are the least likely to contribute to wider society, who frequently act at times in a parasitic fashion.
You will feel enriched and fulfilled and happier. I really think, and I know it sounds sort of extreme or perhaps like I'm hyperbolizing to say it, I think it's the answer to everything.
Oh, I know it's the answer to everything. That's why it's frustrating.
No, I don't believe that all groups are equal in kindness, in honesty, in decency. The achievements and the decency of a group will basically correlate with its average IQ. So Orthodox Jews have an above average level of IQ. And with other higher IQ groups, they are going to commit substantially fewer violent crimes, right? You're much less likely to be the victim of a violent crime from Orthodox Jews than from your average person. Right? Orthodox Jews commit very few acts of murder or violent crime, as do high IQ non-Orthodox Jews. They commit very few rates of murder and violent crime.
Frustrating that it isn't out there more.
I know.
As much as it's out there, my biggest frustration is it's not out there more. This is the answer to evil or even unhappiness.
Mm-hmm.
Is the Torah the answer to evil and unhappiness? So let's define evil as Dennis Prager does, needless human cruelty. So for some people, the application of Torah to their lives does reduce their propensity to be needlessly cruel. But for plenty of other Orthodox Jews, it does not seem to have any effect on their propensity to be needlessly cruel. So I would argue that the best solution to needless cruelty is human connection. People who are connected to their family and to their community and to their friends, they are much less likely in general to be cruel, particularly to their in-group.
I said this, I know I said the first part on our podcast, but I said this second part in the PragerU video I just filmed, and I think it's worth mentioning here. you know that I think it's incredibly creepy that people my age fight against things that most of them have never seen before: racism, climate change, oppression. You know, what are their words? Homophobia, transphobia, etc.
So yeah, I believe that kindness essentially equates with IQ levels, and so Half Galatians says, I think there is variated kindness found among equal IQ people if sorting by ethnic group. So it would depend on certain types of kindness. So, for example, Jews are very warm. Jews tend to be very hospitable. You're not, likely to go hungry if you're invited to a Jewish home, as say compared to a WASP home. All right, Jews are much more emotional, wear their feelings on their sleeve. They're much more likely to treat you like a member of the family, to be hospitable, bring you food and drink, as compared to, say, a Northern European home. They're more likely to be physically and emotionally demonstrative towards you compared to, say, Northern Europeans. On the other hand, people of Northern European heritage are more likely to obey the law. I wish that wasn't true. They're less likely to conduct insider trading, right? They're much less likely to make pornography, to promote rap music. Now, Orthodox Jews wouldn't be, promoting rap music or pornography either. But different people have different gifts. So I'm open. I'm sure different groups at the same level of IQ. I'm sure there's something to Half Galatians' point. They have different propensities to various manifestations of kindness, right? There are many types of kindness, and I'm sure some groups, even at the same IQ level, have a higher demonstration of certain forms of kindness than other groups. So what type of person falls hard for a guru? Like, what the hell was up with me that makes me so vulnerable to cults and to gurus?
Vulnerability. As you always said, I think interest, conspiratorial reasoning, and that kind of thing make you more vulnerable. I don't think, though, it's like, I think that the vulnerabilities are all very different from what makes someone want to be a guru, because the people that follow, apart from the ones that become minor gurus, right, like your Alexandros Marinos or those kind of type of people, I think the other the follower people tend to be the kind of things that would make people vulnerable to joining any kind of group, for better or worse, like people that are dealing with something difficult in their own lives, or people who feel a little like that something is missing, or that kind of thing. Those are all risk factors, because the kind of message that guru types give you is that they're helping you to see something special about the world that other people can't, and that you have these unique characteristics that mean you're willing to listen to the message and to look deeper. So I think having low self-esteem, or dealing with traumas or that kind of thing, it makes you more susceptible to that. And I was watching this Matthew McConaughey content, right, which is much more like, that's your kind of Tony Robbins self-help stuff, and you just see them really, really preying on people's insecurities and giving them this false allure of community. But I think the gurus are doing that, but maybe for people who more would like to be think of themselves as intellectual. And maybe it's also a risk factor if you say you wanted to go to university, or you feel like that your kind of insight isn't recognized enough. So I think holding a grudge at the educated elites looking down on people, that kind of thing seems to be a common thing. So yeah, but I don't know, because I'm not saying that you go to university and that would inoculate you against that. A good example, although this is a bit tangential, is that the Tokyo subway attack in the 90s by the Aum Shinrikyo cult in Japan. Maybe you vaguely remember that happened.
It was a long time ago, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So that group primarily recruited from elite universities in Japan, and people at elite universities tend to be from wealthy families, and they are also likely to go into good companies and that kind of thing. And people were like, why would those people want to join a bizarre weird cult around this crazy, not even, I mean, he is charismatic, but just weird cult leader? And I think the thing is, if you are successful and you feel dissatisfaction, or if you say you've got your degree, or you're in the company, but Fight Club and all those things where people feel like ennui and then they want something more, and there's various ways that you can get that. But Jordan Peterson and co, they really are telling people here's the way to live your life. I can make you feel better. And yeah, I think it's kind of a lot of the risk factors around the same kind of risk factors that would make you likely to fall prey to self-help cults or multi-level marketing, but maybe with a slightly more intellectual political bent. So maybe people that wouldn't fall for a multi-level marketing scheme would buy into, you know, a like political polemicist kind of IDW type, because they're not doing multi-level marketing. They're just giving you a podcast. Yeah, that's a very long-winded answer.
Yeah, who do you think is more dangerous to their followers, a guru or a pundit, or I should say, or who's maybe dangerous is too strong of a word.
I think so I think, like, say Jordan Peterson, right? For the majority of people that follow him, I don't think, you know, I understand why people regard him the way that they do, but I think for the vast majority of his followers, he's just someone that they kind of admire and, you know, listen to his lectures, and maybe they tell people some stupid things that he has said that they apply to their life. But I think that it's there's a subset of people for whom people like Jordan Peterson are dangerous. Whereas on the other hand, I don't think that there are many people who go to like multi-level marketing type scams that you know, just take it lightly and don't really get involved in it. So I think there's a lot, because there's lower commitment to following like online gurus. I think that makes a difference. But I do think that like their impact on the you know, the culture can be pretty huge. Like I think Jordan Peterson has led a lot of males towards being more misogynistic, and in a way that they wouldn't.
Or what about someone like Andrew Tate, who's even worse?
Yeah, he's even worse. But that's the kind of thing where I feel like people that are into, like, so there's a continuum, right? And I think that Andrew Tate is too extreme for some people who otherwise would, but Jordan Peterson would be okay for them, right? So like, but I think that the direction of flow is towards like more misogynistic content and that kind of thing. But you will get people who maybe move from like consuming Andrew Tate content to consuming Jordan Peterson content, and actually
which would be better.
Yeah, but I kind of, you know, Andrew Tate is, compared to Peterson, like he's much worse because he's openly misogynistic, and like Peterson is misogynistic, but like in a slightly pure way. So yeah, it's but that's the thing. I think it depends on the guru, but like take Scott Adams. I think Scott Adams is like feeding his followers right-wing conspiratorial rhetoric constantly, and that's bad for them. But I also think a lot of people that follow Scott Adams probably are already right-wing partisans, and they just listen to him, and they listen to Rush Limbaugh, and you know, they listen to Tucker, and you know, that like it's not, if he wasn't there, they'll just go and listen to someone else tell them the same thing. So I'm a bit more concerned about the people who can't be kind of replaced. Like Jordan Peterson, I think, does something that only he can, and he has imitators and stuff now, but it's, in that sense, he might not be more outright damaging, but I think he can recruit people to follow him that other guru types couldn't. So yeah, I mean, he set a whole playbook. Like he's kind of responsible for the sense making ecosystem. So he deserves some condemnation for that. Double click on that, Amber. Just double click.
Okay, so what is it about Jordan Peterson?
Everybody, when I never met in person, I never met Jordan Peterson in person. But I said to him when we met right before lunch, something that is said to me by so many people who meet me for the first time: I feel like I know you. And
so what we're talking about here is a parasocial relationship. When you encourage people to think that they know you, you're encouraging a delusion.
That is the highest compliment in effect.
When you encourage people to think that they know you based on your public performances, you're encouraging people in a delusion.
I now understand what a compliment it is when I receive it, because I never gave it to somebody before you.
It's not a compliment. When someone says, I feel like I know you, all right, and that's a statement of a parasocial relationship. It's a statement of a delusion.
And I have watched you for hours and listened to you and read your book. And in fact, I didn't just read your book, I heard your book from you. So I want to tell you something without embarrassing you. But I think I like to, you open your heart and your mind, and so do I.
Gurus love it when you'll open your heart and your mind to them, and even your legs, so that they can teach you Torah through the tip of their penis.
When I was very young, I realized that God or nature had given me what I have called a goodness detector. And I always knew when I was in the presence of a good person,
because that's all I really care about. I think brains are wildly overrated. Wildly.
So do you really think that goodness is all Dennis Prager really cares about? Do you think status, hanging out with high status people, you think that's something he cares about even a little bit?
That's why I think you're not bright if you join Mensa. Why you would want to announce to the world your IQ is so bizarre to me that I'm sure there are nice people there, but I don't understand it. But I always picked up that, and I've always been right.
So do you really think that Dennis Prager has always been right? Do you think he was right when he befriended me and said, I can die in peace knowing that you'll be around to carry on the fight for good values? Do you think he was right?
I'm batting 1,000 essentially. And when I heard you read your book, the passion comes from, I just want to help people lead a better life. And it's really, it's quite...
Yeah, pretty much every guru has that passion. I just want to help people lead a better life. And if you'll just subscribe to my Substack, if you'll just join my online club, if you'll just buy my book, I really think I can help you lead a better life. And what type of people are vulnerable to this? People, like me with low self-esteem, with anxiety, tendencies towards self-hatred, depression, a sense of, failure, discontent. Right? People like me are really vulnerable to this kind of message.
Overwhelming. You didn't just read that book. I won't say you sang it, but I like that you use music. I'm very much into music too. So this is the man that I'm honored to have this dialogue with, because everybody knows you're bright, but I know you're good. So I wanted to state that at the outset.
And then this is another thing that gurus would do. And they'll say to you, wow, if you're watching this show, that you must be a good person. You must be a smarter person. You must be a finer and kinder person than average if you're watching this show, because I'm devoted to goodness. Therefore, you must also be a person who's devoted to goodness and refinement. And I can just tell from the quality of your comments in the chat that you too care about leading a refined and elevated life.
See, I have something to say about that.
Good. That's good.
See, I don't think it's true.
So one reason that Jordan Peterson is on the edge of tears throughout this conversation is that he'd recently found out that his wife had been diagnosed with cancer.
I mean, this is why I got motivated to do what I've been doing. And I've been doing what I've been doing for, I would say, since about 1979 in one form or another, because things take a long time to generate. And one of the things I learned in the early 80s was that people have a great capacity for evil. And I didn't really understand that of myself until the early 80s, something like that, after meditating on it for a long time. And so I would say, it's not that I would never claim to be good. I think it's dangerous. But I did become terrified of how terrible I could be. And I mean, I became terrified about how terrible human beings could be, and that's one thing, but that's easy. It's easy to confuse that with other human beings. It's a different thing to understand that it's true of yourself. I often recommend to my students that they read history as a perpetrator and not as a victim or a hero. And people very seldom do that, and it's no wonder. But I would say, perhaps, that I became terrified enough from learning what I learned that I tried to avoid the pathways that lead people to the dark places that they go.
What's What's the best way to avoid the pathways that lead you to a dark place? Avoid situations that lead you to a dark place. Yeah, it's the important of the situation. So why do you almost never hear gurus repent? Why do you almost never hear pundits repent for their bad epistemics? This is Australian psychologist Matthew Brown, Irish anthropologist Christopher Kavanagh, who lives in Japan.
Conspiracy mongering? Nah.
No. I mean, technically that stuff with the satanic abuse, whatever, maybe there was
They're talking about Oprah here.
Conspiratorial elements there, but really that's just her platforming stuff she really shouldn't have.
She's just credulous.
And a lot of people did, like you said, in the 90s and stuff. It's not really her brand. It's just rather, in hindsight, highly irresponsible. But that's 2020 hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah,
I
was noticing, I'll just mention
give her one.
I give her one too on this in passing, that there's very few examples I can think of where somebody was conspiratorial or like promoting pseudoscience, saw the error of their ways, and has developed better epistemics. It's really rare. Really, really rare for a public figure. And then now, not something like when you were a teenager, you believed in Roswell and you were interested in aliens, and that you like debunked the funk, right? Who we spoke to, not like that, but like you're a public figure, you're promoting something like anti-vaccine or whatever, and you go the other way.
You don't see the error of your ways and go, yeah, I used to buy into that stuff, and I looked into it more and I realized, no, it's sad, isn't it? It's sad.
And the people that were previously examples of that, like you could kind of say, Majid Nawaz or something, right, for Islamic extremism or that kind of thing, they often just fall into
some other
another bucket, right? Yeah. So it's just depressing. I was thinking about it and was like, there's many examples I can think of the inverse, but I cannot for the life of me think of like more than a handful of cases going the other way. And you're just like,
so what are the chances that Dennis Prager repents for his bad epistemics and promoting bad epistemics? Epistemics refers to epistemology, which is how do we know what we know? So Dennis Prager, in various areas of life, is really bad at figuring out what is true from what is false because he is innumerate, but rather than simply noting that he is innumerate and therefore doesn't have the skills to assess the quality of academic studies, he just says, oh, if academic studies, differ from my understanding of what is common sense, then I just automatically dismiss them.
It's like, that's very depressing because it means it's very rare for people to.
Yeah, it's like a one-way street. It's like becoming a conspiracist. Getting into conspiracy theories. Like you see people become conspiracists, but you don't see many people coming back
out of that. No. It's the problem. So no, profiteering. She freaking profits. She profits like.
So this is a Garometer edition here on Oprah. What kind of a guru is Oprah?
Motherfucker. So she's good at it. She could teach Jordan Peterson how to profit better. So she's definitely a 5 on that.
Yeah, I'm going to give her a 5 too. I mean, I kind of disagree with herself with the way she characterized her career. I mean, I characterize her career as very cannily being amazingly successful in the entertainment biz, giving people what sold well. And I think that actually motivated her to kind of justify it, to kind of retcon it a bit in those kind of interviews and recast it as part of her journey towards being a more responsible or whatever. But actually, no. I mean, it's not to say she's not generous and doing some good things now. Good on her, but that was not the thing that propelled her towards wealth and fabulous popularity.
Okay, now we have our little binary on-off switches. So monomania, does she have a single thing? No, I don't. No. Destiny, could kind of say, but I think that's not really what it means.
No.
Shilling supplements. I don't know if she does that. She would.
So pretty much every right-wing radio talk show host has to shill supplements because regular brands won't advertise so much on nationally syndicated right-wing talk radio, so they have to shill ridiculous supplements all the time.
Like, I feel like
she does not need to. She does not need to. No. So, but we can't tick that. Broicity, no. There's the opposite.
The opposite of broicity.
Whatever.
Feminicity.
Feminicity. Yeah.
Charisma. Yes.
Yes.
Neologisms, like inventing her own. No, she just kicks what other people say. Strategic disclaimers. No. Like she does them, but it's not like a feature of what she's up to.
No.
Rebranding theories as her own.
No,
because she can't give credit. She's like, Eckhart Tolle said blah blah blah, and
loquacious. Sure.
Yeah, she's just a polished presenter, really. Never admitting error.
No.
Does she admit error?
Yes, she admits error.
Okay,
So look,
I mean, she doesn't about like vaccines or Dr. Phil or anything like that of significance, but she admits she is like, I did tons of things wrong, blah 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 blah.
No. So look, here's the deal with Oprah. She is absolutely like I think a secular guru and a guru for the modern age.
Secular.
Yeah, and in our definition of secular, like these people, they're not like the old religious prophets, right?
But
having this fuzzy abstract spirituality in there. Yes, it's not it is still secular, Chris, right?
Is
it's
it?
it's a kind of magical thinking that's been smuggled into what is on the face of it a secular worldview, right?
Small gel pack.
Thinking, not the anti-secular.
Look, it's like homeopathy, right? Homeopathy is absolutely a secular belief system. Right?
I don't, but I no, but like I feel homeopathy is a magical belief system with just a
Okay, so Dennis Prager makes a big deal about how he even changes advertising copy because he is so devoted to the truth. I'm thinking Dennis Prager would have an easier time, and it'd probably be the more moral thing to not make those proclamations, to just simply say that you're reading what the advertising copy says, because otherwise you end up in ridiculous situations.
In private,
same with
maybe
grammar,
twice.
yeah.
You rarely
right,
curse.
but when I do,
but when you do, it's hilarious.
Yes, exactly. That's the point.
Yes.
In 2008, the amount of concentrated time people could spend on a task without becoming distracted was 12 seconds. 5 years later, it was 8 seconds. The digital age is narrowing our attention span. Trouble concentrating or recalling information is frustrating, embarrassing, and kills productivity. Advanced nutrition company Healthy Cell created focus and recall to boost your brain power. Unlike other supplements that don't work, focus and recall is not a pill. It's a patent-pending gel you swallow with ultra absorption of science-backed ingredients to help you immediately sharpen focus, concentrate longer, and strengthen recall. These physician-formulated gels come in a small gel pack. Tear off the top, shoot it down, or mix it in water. Over 1,000 reviews with an average star rating over 4.5 prove it works. Supercharge your brain and see the difference. Go to healthycell.com. Use the limited time code Prager, Prager, for 20% off your first order. Risk-free. Love it or your money back guaranteed. Healthycell.com code Prager. Healthycell.com code Prager.
Okay, back to contentment and happiness.
Fine.
So I asked.
All right, this is Matt Brown talking to Chris Kavanaugh.
But that's the thing; they smuggle it in. But it's not. It has to be. It's not.
They're not fooling me, Matt. Not fooling me.
No.
I can see your argument, but I think.
Well, anyway, that's not the point. Just let it be. What I wanted to say was that she's definitely guru, is what I wanted to say.
I agree with that.
Right? She's a modern guru,
yes.
regarded as such by her fans. Thinks of herself as someone with a special message for people, make the world a better place. All that stuff. She does not. She has done a lot of things, made a lot of ill-considered decisions, shall we say, in her long and storied career. But she does not fit the toxic guru mold that the gurometer is designed to identify.
I toxic secular guru mold that the gurometer covers. So yes, I agree on the.
And you know, one of the main reasons, Chris, and we've struck this before with other characters we've covered, is that when their job or they present themselves is primarily as a kind of a journalist or an entertainer, not as being you know, like a special intellectual genius. She doesn't present herself as that, right? She presents herself as your friendly lady in the media sphere who you can sit down with, and she'll introduce you to some interesting things and
except for the comments about I think that might just be seeping in the kind of I was a childhood prodigy who skipped years and blah blah blah. Like that,
I don't think she said prodigy. She was very smart. She was smart, but that's just, I suspect she's just saying the facts there. I mean,
maybe, but I think that I think it's that thing of that the gurus imagine themselves as special people because they're known, right? And in some cases they are very famous and they're known for doing some stuff, right, in some regard. And it feels like there's kind of more validity to their claim to be like significant, at least, because like Oprah did something, Elon did something, whereas, you know, Brett and Eric and Jordan Hall, they, you know, whatever they did is much less notable. But I think that's still the survivorship bias thing coming in, where, you know, are they that special? I certainly not as special as they imagine themselves to be. So yeah, I think there's a bit that's difficult because it's hard to detach the fact that they have done something, right? Which in some respects is remarkable or notable, but that doesn't mean it's because of their characteristics.
Yeah, I mean, look, Oprah thinks she's special, but in a very normal way, you know. Like, you find me people that are that rich and famous that don't think that.
Yeah, but that's the characteristic that are that rich and famous and don't think that they are special in some way, and that's why they're rich and famous. But
right, here's an interesting tweet by the account Mearsheimer fan. I despise wokeism with a seething passion. I want to end cultural Marxism, Joe McCarthy style, but this has to stop. Woke is a slogan, not a platform. looks so unserious if constantly parroted in this manner, especially when Ron DeSantis doesn't discuss issues people actually